I know it seems like such a noisy mess that it's easy to tune out, but here's a thought for you. While we debate whether humans can really change the climate or not, we are at the same time running the experiment. The kicker is, no matter what the outcome of the experiment, we're in the test tube. We've got to get to the bottom of the controversy as quickly as possible. But how do you know which side to believe?
How about we believe the side that has the empirical evidence to support its position? Dr. Richard Lindzen recently wrote a paper that takes into account actual satellite data. It doesn't just rely on climate models. The study falsifies the greenhouse theory. But I agree that we are in an experiment and there is a lot of uncertainty. And that means that no matter what we do or don't do, the climate will change anyway, and there will always be winners and losers.
Well, what if I told you I've got a way to look at it where you don't need to believe anyone, but you can still decide with confidence what we should do? What are you smoking?
Exactly. What are you smoking? And now you're talking to yourself. What are we going to do this time around? Are we going to do another round of Pascal's wager and fill in the magic squares?
Too. So I put it out there in a video, and after being critiqued by thousands of people, I think I've now got a conclusion that is pretty much undeniable.
Well, here, let me help you. I deny your conclusion because your conclusion is not based on any empirical evidence.
No one's perfect. So every choice you make brings with it a risk if that choice turns out to be a mistake. Given that, which risk would you rather take? Listen to the activists and take big action now, risking the possible harm to the economy that the skeptics warn us about, or listen to the skeptics and don't take big action now, risking the possible destruction and upheaval that the activists warn us about. Bottom line is, which is the more acceptable risk?
Okay, so I see you're going to do Pascal's wager all over again and fill in the magic squares one more time. I guess since it didn't succeed the first time you tried this, I guess your attitude is to try again until you do succeed. You know, here's a better approach. You might try to find some evidence to support your argument.
It's often useful to look at the different possibilities for the future. The first possibility is whether human-caused global warming turned out to be true or not. So let's put F for the future where it turns out to be false and T for it turns out to be true. The other possibility is what actually...
Blah-bitty, blah, blah, blah. Let me skip ahead here.
We didn't take action, but the doomsayers turned out to be right. Well, if we did the most pessimistic view up here, we should do the same thing down here. And this, you've heard before. We have environmental, political, social, public health, and economic disasters on a global scale, a disaster scenario. Now, obviously, this is grossly simplified. The smiley faces give that away.
Yes, it is grossly simplified. That was the point I made previously. And a lot of other skeptics made the same point. Here's another possibility. If we do take action, it could cause the very global disaster that you're trying to prevent, because we really don't know for certain what our actions will do to the climate or what effect or impact they will have. Perhaps adding carbon dioxide could be the best thing we could do to the atmosphere. After all, carbon dioxide is good for plants. And if we were to remove carbon dioxide, we could all die because the plants wouldn't get enough food, and neither would we, and we would all perish. All animal life and all plant life would perish on the planet if we take action against climate change. And that is the worst case scenario that you're not considering.
Is to not look at what individual scientists are saying, but instead look at what the professional organizations are saying. The more prestigious they are, the more weight you can give their statements, because they've got huge reputations to uphold.
Oh, I see. So the emperor is wearing clothes. And the child who says the emperor is naked is completely wrong because he's not big enough or prestigious enough. But then science is not really about who has the most weight and who doesn't. It's really about the empirical evidence. So why don't we take a look at that? Because that is what the scientific method is all about. It's not how many people you have on your team versus how many people I have on my team.
Probably the two most well-respected of these in the world are NAS and AAAS. These are not advocacy groups, but both recently issued unprecedented statements calling for big action now on global warming. This isn't a bunch of hippies. These are the nerdiest people on the planet.
Well, if that's all true, then the ClimateGate scientists must have had their heads up their asses because they apparently were suffering from the delusion that global temperatures were declining and that they needed to hide that decline. Gosh, didn't they believe those two prestigious scientific organizations you just cited?
I can see that. But if the statements from those groups are such a slam dunk, how can we still hear so much debate? Well, there is a handful of dissenting scientists, like there always is, and a media that knows that controversy sells.
Yeah, a handful being about 30,000 scientists, including 9,000 PhDs. Yes, that's how many. That's a handful of dissenting scientists.
It's a little odd to me. We buy car insurance without being certain that we'll get into an accident because we want to make sure that if it does happen, we don't end up broke.
Well, that's a bad analogy because we can both agree that automobile accidents could very well happen in the future, and here's why we can agree on that. Because there is empirical evidence to support it. Do you understand? Gee, I hope you do.
It'll do fine on its own. What I care about is saving our bacon. And I understand how overwhelming it is when you hear cries about save the whales, or the rainforests, or the children, or air pollution, water pollution, light pollution, toxic waste, nuclear waste, government waste, corporate waste, peak oil, snake oil, hybrid, lockout, and game immigrating, ANWR, gun rights, human rights, water rights, rights, and abortion rights. Where do you start? Let me suggest a way to prioritize. All of these. Peanuts, if the worst of this comes to happen.
But if we take action, it could happen anyway, because as you previously said, there's a lot of uncertainty. And since there is a lack of empirical evidence to support your assertion that there's going to be a doom and gloom situation, we would be better off spending our money on finding a cure for cancer, because we can both agree that cancer is a real threat to humanity. And why can we agree? Come on, you can do it. Because there's empirical evidence to support the idea that cancer can wipe out humanity.
But why the hysteria? What's the big deal about a degree or two? Yeah, it turns out it's not the warming that gets you. It's the way that such a quick change throws a monkey wrench in the whole system. That's why global warming is a misleading name, and global climate change is only a little better. Really what we're talking about is global climate destabilization. And it gets worse because in just the last 5 years, we've learned that this may happen very abruptly, like within the span of a decade. So it may turn out to be like pushing on a light switch. Small pushes in the past have produced small results, until you hit an unexpected tipping point.
Tell that to the ClimateGate scientists. They think the world is getting cooler and that they need to hide the decline. Furthermore, 600 million years ago, the atmosphere had a concentration of carbon dioxide to the tune of 7,000 parts per million. Now, if the world didn't reach a tipping point then, it's certainly not going to reach a tipping point at 600 parts per million, which would be a doubling of the current amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So, again, what is the hysteria all about?